So hi everyone, I am thrilled to speak with Jess Currier today, who is a painter based in Los Angeles, which is really cool. She is an amazing floral and portrait painter. I'm absolutely in love with her work. So she blends realism and emotion really beautifully. So beyond painting, she also teaches and has built a full-time business by staying true to her voice. So let's meet her. Hello Jess, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing so well and so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me, and what an intro. I'm honored.
Yes, well thank you so much for saying yes. I've been a large fan of your artwork for many years now, probably like 5 years or something. The years just go
No
by.
way.
Yeah,
Oh, that's so
I just
cool.
love it. So beautiful. So how did you first get into painting in the first place?
Well, my story's a little bit funny because I knew I wanted to be a painter from when I was like this big. I was like 6 years old, and I don't even remember not wanting to be an artist. I was one of those kids that I think it was connected to just the way I saw the world. It felt like it was just part of who I was. Creative expression was the natural outpouring of the input, I guess, like seeing the beauty in nature and flowers, like those were a theme, even when I was a tiny kid. And that sense of awe at seeing the beauty of the world and that sense of inspiration, I think just naturally resulted in it needed an output, it needed creative expression. And I felt that pull and that call to it as, in my earliest memories. And when I was exposed to actual artwork and I saw paintings, it just touched something in my soul that I knew, this is what I'm supposed to do. And then you hit adolescence and you start to be able to experience education in these things and kind of get exposed to that. And I wasn't very naturally gifted in the arts early on. I was inclined toward it, but I wasn't like a prodigy by any stretch. And so I kind of had absorbed this idea of what I call the myth of talent. Basically that if you're not naturally great at something when you start out, especially in creative fields, you must just not have it. It must just not be for you. That sucks, too bad. And really, I think it was an ego thing. I wanted so badly to be good at art because I cared about it so much, but I didn't have the life experience or the maturity to recognize that that was a skill that needed to be developed and I needed to be bad at it first. And it really took me an embarrassingly long time to kind of come around from that. And I ended up doing a lot of art adjacent things. I did photography and graphic design and environmental branding and art direction. I did a whole bunch of freelance work that has, thankfully, those skills have transferred into running a business as an artist. But initially, I was actually just running away from painting because I was so scared of being bad at it. And it wasn't until my mid to late 20s that I really kind of came to terms with, well, I'd rather be an artist and be bad at it than not make art at all. And I finally gave myself permission to make bad art. And then what do you know? I put in the practice and I got good at it when I practiced. What a concept, right? We kind of forget that creative work is like anything else. It's a skill you can build. And so it really was when I finally gave myself that permission that I started putting in the work and discipline to build those skills and become better. And fast forward over a decade, and now I've built my life around painting itself. But it was a really roundabout journey to get there. It took me a really long time to actually apply myself to it. But it was the best decision I ever made.
Oh yeah, I think so too. I'm so glad you did that because I love your work. No, that's so good because I think a lot of people give up too quickly as well, don't they? They do, like, they try and draw something, oh, I'm just terrible, I'll never be an artist, and then that's it. They never try again, and it's quite sad because, like, how many more other art styles and things will you see in the art world if more people like you actually practiced and put in the time?
I love that. That's what I always say too, is that like when people don't make art, everybody loses. Like no one wins from that. Nobody gains anything from all the art that isn't made. Like the world is not better, like it's worse off. And when I think even just on a human level, I think we become, this is my bias, that I think we become better people when we have that outlet for creative expression and that kind of application of disciplined practice. And that alone is like good for your life. It's good for the people around you. It's good for the world. Not to mention the actual like fruits of that labor, of the creative expression and that voice that only you can bring, that art that only you can make, that perspective that wouldn't exist in the world if you didn't bring it. So yeah, everybody loses when art doesn't get made. So the more we can break down those barriers, the better.
Exactly, I completely agree. So, what kind of art and styles did you try out before the one that you have now?
That's a great question. I came to the style that I have now through a very long and winding path. I think that's true for a lot of artists a lot of the time, and that's another kind of myth that I think is important to break down. You know, style is not something that you just innately have. I like to think of it like an archaeologist doing the dig. Like you show up, you do the work, you do the practice, and you discover what's buried beneath the surface. That's really how I found my style.
I love that
End up going to. It fits, right? Because there's some elements of agency there, like an archaeologist, you know, educates themselves, they build the skills, they choose where to do the dig, they have some sort of idea of what they're looking for, but there's no guarantee of what will actually be discovered because it's buried, and you have to unearth it. And I think as artists, we unearth it by doing the work of creating lots and lots and lots of art. And you know, spoilers, that's how I found my style, was creating lots and lots of art. I struggled with this a lot early on because when you start out, your skills are so far behind your vision. And as you progress in the journey, that gap gets a little bit smaller. I think it always exists. That's part of the beauty of this work, is that it's infinitely able to evolve and change. There's infinite room for growth. And your skill, one of my art school professors who's, 50 years into his career, he's this icon of illustration and painting. And he told us in class that, even at his age, in his point in his career, his vision was a little beyond what he was capable of creating. And that broke my brain. Like, I was like, wait, that's normal? Like, that doesn't mean I'm not good enough at this? It like shattered a ceiling in my brain, that just this block that was like, oh, I can't create what I envision, so therefore I'm a terrible artist. And I think that when you're starting out, though, that gap is really big, and that can be really discouraging and disheartening. And I started painting most consistently in art school. So I was doing the homework assignments. I was doing still life and landscape and all of these things that I wasn't particularly interested in. And I developed a lot of discipline and a lot of good, consistent studio habits. This habit of showing up even when you don't feel inspired about the work. You're there to practice and learn, see what it has to teach you anyway. And through that structure, I then began to explore, as I had more freedom, as I moved through my program in school, I began to explore things that called to me a little bit more. So I did a lot of portraits, I did a lot of flowers. Those were always the themes early on. I've always loved portraiture. I think that's been the biggest source of inspiration in art. I love figurative work. And I always loved, gestural, abstract figurative work, but that's not what came out of me when I was painting. So I think it was also this journey of building the skills, starting to pull at those threads wherever curiosity called to me, and then apply discipline to that practice. And then I started to, kind of put my hands on the dials and move in particular directions. So I started asking questions about, well, if I love things that are abstracted in some way, the author John Seed describes it as disrupted realism, that hybrid of representational work with some element of abstraction that it's filtered through. And I began to start to apply that concept to the subject matter that I was interested in. So what if I integrate these things? And for some of my work, I began photographing my models through floral patterned fabric, like sheer fabric. I would hold it up in front of my camera. And that's how this kind of double exposure series originally started. It was a very cumbersome method, but it had a really interesting effect. And then eventually I ended up creating kind of a digital process that I now use to create a similar effect. But it evolved really slowly. I had to start pulling at those threads from the very beginning, like, oh, I love doing portraits, so I practiced a ton of portraits. And then I love florals, and I did a lot of floral studies. And eventually those combined, and that evolved into this work that I do today. But it happened over years of showing up almost daily and practicing painting.
That's so cool. I love the way you talked about how you put floral patterns up in front of your images. That sounds amazing to take the pictures, because that's basically what your paintings sort of look like, but in, I guess, a much more colourful style than a piece of fabric, because that's definitely what it reminds me of. So that's really cool. That's how it started in the first place.
Yeah, I was very, I didn't by any stretch invent the double exposure look in photographs or in paintings. That's been around for a long time. There are a lot of artists who do it really well. And I was very scared of copying anyone. I was like, I don't want to, step on anyone's work. And we're all influenced, and all our work is built off of what's come before us. We don't exist in a vacuum. So of course we're going to be influenced. But I was I just really wanted to do that with integrity, and I wanted to make sure that I was coming to that creative aesthetic from an authentic place of what was really the work that was calling to me, and the things that I needed to say and the way that I needed to say them. And using the fabric was, I think, also an element of, it was something I couldn't control. It was, it was an experiment. It would be for example, what I'm doing now, I'm creating my own floral patterns and then doing a virtual overlay in Photoshop over my model and tweaking it. And I have a lot of control over kind of every part of it. And when I was doing the fabric, you really can't control that. And it was just me shooting my friend in my backyard, holding up this piece of fabric, trying to get the camera angled right and the right part of the pattern over the subject. And, it would be blurry or weird or abstracted in interesting ways. And I think I had to work through it that way to get to where I am now. So even though I have a very different process today, it's shaped by what came before it.
Yeah, that's incredible. Such a cool way of finding that unique, I guess, style of doing your painting. Because I've always wondered that. I was like, oh, how did you know? How did you know to just put flowers on faces rather than flowers next to faces, like how some people do, because you do see that style, don't you?
Yeah, so it kind of started that way, actually. My original concept for this was for my thesis work in grad school. And it was pre-pandemic, and I had been doing these photo shoots. I like hired a model and went to a community garden, and we were taking these photos of her immersed in these like big walls of flowers and foliage. And that was kind of the work, were these huge paintings of figures immersed in a floral environment. And it was about the idea of our relationship to beauty and hope in the midst of beauty that we can't keep, in the midst of loss, of change, of grief, and that tension of the human experience of having to hold on to that paradox of a sense of awe, of inspiration, of meaning, of magic, and also knowing that we can't hold on to any of it and that it's fleeting and loss and change are inevitable, and yet we still show up, we still hope, we still create. All of my work has kind of been about that tension, and that was the intent behind this immersive, environmental, figurative work. And then COVID hit, and I lost access to my studio space and was living in a tiny apartment where I had to paint at my kitchen table during the lockdowns. And that's when I just started doing portraits, like tiny little quick study portraits. And I kind of developed my voice in that. I did a bunch of portrait and floral studies, and then I was like, just evolved from there and ended up combining them in those layers. And it, I think too, the isolation of the lockdowns and that entire season really shaped the shift in my work from this very immersive environmental approach to a very intimate, veiled, almost masked, aesthetic. And I think that happened very subconsciously. I didn't go in like intellectually being like, oh, the isolation of the pandemic has caused me to lean towards intimacy. Like, it just happened, it just had that influence, and that's what came out. That's what I was processing. I think a lot of the time that's how it works. Like, that's why I say you find your style by doing that dig, by doing the work, because I didn't know that I was painting about grief and hope until after I made those paintings. I figured it out later, and I learned to articulate it even later than that. Mm-hmm. And the answers, though, were in the work. You can't find those answers without doing the work. All of the answers are in the work.
Yeah, definitely. No, I love that. I love how you're showing how you're being influenced by your environment, by your emotions, without even knowing it. And I think that's the whole point of being an artist, is communicating yourself. Whether you're knowing what you're communicating, you're still communicating yourself through your art, and then people get to see that. And yeah, I do see that whole veiled, masked emotion thing through your art. It's so beautiful. Is there a specific one that you painted and you thought, wow, yeah, that's it, like I found exactly the style I love?
Yes, there's specifically one painting that was like, oh, this is different. This is it. This is what's shifting. It's called Grief and Hope Are Sisters, which very fitting title as well, because that's kind of what this entire series is about. It's what all my work is about, is that relationship and that tension between grief and hope. And it's this very intimate composition of a girl hunched over, leaning over her legs and looking into the camera, and you just see kind of like one eye in the corner, and there's an overlay of a pattern of forget-me-nots in front of her. And this was the first one of the first ones I did, it was big too. It was like 2 by 3 feet, which was larger than I'd been working. And I'd done some in this series up to this point. I had done the fabric ones and a couple that were, I created in Photoshop, and they turned out really great too. But this one it hit a different nerve. It came from a different place in my soul, I think. I was going through a very, very dark, difficult season in my personal life. And I did this painting over like a year. Normally I could finish one of these in a few weeks, even the large ones if I'm showing up to the studio. But this was like, I had planned this painting out, and I was going through all this really difficult time and was literally just like showing up, and some days all I could do was paint, a few petals on it. And this gets a little woo-woo, but I really believe that we kind of have a relationship with our creativity and a relationship with our work. And it's the concept from Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Big Magic, where she talks about our contract with creativity when we enter a project. You enter a contract with creativity. When you say yes to inspiration, you are committing to bring that idea to life. That's your end of the bargain that you need to hold up. And what was really beautiful about this painting and this season in particular is that I had so little to give at this point in my life. I was stretched so thin and going through such a hard time that I almost, like, sometimes I would just come to the studio and get other work done and lay on the floor or cry or like whatever I needed to do while I was going through it. And I would just, sometimes before I would leave, I would just come over and literally talk to the painting and say, I promise I'll finish you. Like, I promise I'll come back to you. So it kind of shaped this idea of my relationship with my work. And I believed that inspiration was generous and patient, and that I could trust my own commitment to the work, and that idea could trust me to follow through no matter how long it took. And we had this understanding that I would make sure to bring that idea to life. And I believed that even though it was taking me a long time, that my creativity understood why, and the inspiration would still be there whenever I could come back to her. And even though that painting took a year, that painting then kind of became, it went pretty viral on social media, and it kind of became this catalyst for the career that I have now. No one thing can be attributed to that. Obviously, that's a result of many years of dedicated showing up and working and sharing the work. But it was a very pivotal painting that did well online, and a lot of people connected with it. And it brought me a ton of opportunities that have taken me on this path that I'm on since. And I can kind of trace it all back to that painting, which I love
That's
because
amazing.
She was the most patient.
Well, that's a beautiful story. So when you painted that painting then, and you felt like, this is the one kind of thing, how did you sort of learn to trust that you, I guess from then on, did that style and developed that style? And did you ever feel like you needed to try something else as well, or?
So I think I kind of, at that point, I was just so in love with that idea that I was okay with applying myself to it for a long time. And I was ready for the commitment, I guess. And on the other side of that, I also had been painting long enough at that point that I trusted that my creativity could evolve and change, and that I would be able to navigate those evolutions. And I think the work, it's stayed along that aesthetic track since that painting, which was like 2021, 2022 about. So for the last few years, I've been working on this series of these, double exposure floral pattern figures. And I think it'll start, I'm already seeing it start to evolve. I have some paintings planned out and some references created that are taking a little bit of a shift towards more abstraction, and they're getting a little bit weirder. I'm going to explore the full figure, lots of different things, different like image techniques that I've played with in Photoshop. A lot of the creative process happens virtually for me, so that's where I do a lot of playing and experimentation, and that's going to be shifting the direction of the work. I recently did one for a show in LA that's like a blue, almost like inverted floral over the figure. And I'll have that image for you so you can pop it up. But that's a shift in direction. And so it'll evolve and change over time. And I know that I can like trust that I have room to do that. But I am also a big proponent of giving yourself parameters and a framework to work within, because it's like anything in life. Like, you can have anything you want, but not everything all at once. Just the nature of, you need to, if you're going to get depth in something, you need a certain level of exclusivity, of commitment, to be able to apply yourself to it, because we only have so much capacity to give. And so the way I've seen it is that I've kind of applied myself to this technique in large part because I fell in love with it and I really enjoy it, but also because I think that that's a big part of how you find the rewards. That's how, like, when you do that dig as an archaeologist, if you move around and you only dig shallowly in lots of different places, you might find lots of interesting things, but you're not going to get that full picture, that depth, that richness that could be there if you apply yourself to one site and go deep. And I think that's kind of how I see this approach, is I've chosen something to go deep in. And it's been very rewarding to do that. And I have no regrets around that. Also because I could always change. I can always try something else. But yeah.
I really love your approach. Yeah, I really love your approach. It's very helpful and useful for people. Even me, like, I have been doing commissions for years, so I haven't necessarily gone to try and do my own work and to find my own style in that sense. So I'm finding this so useful to learn from you.
I'm so glad.
Of how to approach it, and it just sounds so good. So I'm sure our listeners as well will find this really useful if they're looking for their style and,
it's
to
a
not
big
give
question.
up.
Yeah, it's a big question for a lot of artists of how do I find my style. And I think a lot of artists too are really afraid to be like tied down to one thing. We like our freedom. We like to be able to be inspired by different things. And
they're afraid of the word niche.
What's that?
I feel like some artists are afraid of the word niche.
Totally. Very afraid of the word niche. And I have, I guess, kind of a hot take on that a little bit, where I think niche is actually quite a superpower. And I know that we want to like buck against it, but the way I have described it to students and people who are feeling stuck around this is that I think of having to have a style or a niche as kind of what I call a gravity problem. A problem that you can't change the way things work. It's like gravity. It just exists, and you have to learn how to navigate the world within that context and that framework. It's the same sort of thing with living under late stage capitalism and needing to like pay your rent. There's some level of commercial and business considerations that if you would like to carve out a lot of time in your life to make art, so you want to make a living from it, well, there are certain things you need to consider as you approach that about how to practically make that work, right? Those are gravity problems of, okay, what is the framework? What kind of situation am I actually in? What are my needs? How do I meet those? And then, obviously we all want to like be just fairy artists floating around on the whims of inspiration, but we live in this reality. We live under this gravity problem. So how do we hold that tension of finding the right balance in our particular situations of that freedom to explore and evolve and change and grow and create what's calling to us, while still, achieving certain outcomes that you might need practically? Being able to bring in a certain amount of income, or if you want to get into galleries or have an online following or hit any of these kind of external markers of success, if those are meaningful to you, well, it takes certain approaches to be able to achieve those things. And we can complain about how, oh, I wish I could just follow the whims of inspiration and paint whatever calls to me. But like, I wish I could just eat cake all day and also have abs, but like, that's not how it works. So we have to make some compromises and build our approach around what's going to actually support our goals. And sometimes that means focusing in. And going back to that idea of exclusivity and depth, it's the same thing with your art. It's kind of like, this is a weird example, but like, you could have a lot of fun experiences dating a lot of people if that's what you want, but you're not going to find the same depth and richness that you might in a long-term commitment with someone that you spend your whole life with, and you have that partner and you're with them all the time. Yeah, you by doing that, you're missing out on other things, and by doing this, you're missing out on things here. It's the same kind of thing with your work. If you want to make lots of different things and just explore and play, that's a beautiful thing, and you can do that. But that won't sustain a career in the arts based on your work specifically. It won't sustain, a certain type of reputation or being able to work in galleries or whatever it is that you're looking for. And there are artists who have found ways to kind of get the best of both, who do lots of different things, but they make their income by teaching, or they, do other things. They do commissions. Like, it's not one or the other. It's just about understanding the reality, the gravity problems, figuring out what your needs and your goals are, and then configuring your career to support you in that path. And there's no one right or wrong path. It's just about, is what you're doing actually going to get you where you want to go?
Definitely. A bit like, so if you did like do lots of different styles and never really focusing on one like you have and really go deeper with that, you never really know what you're capable of as well, and what things you'll discover and explore by just trying one thing for a long period of time.
Absolutely. And I think too, a lot of us are afraid of discipline as artists. We want to lean into the play of it. And there's this kind of myth that you're supposed to paint or create from a place of inspiration primarily. And that if that's not present in your process, then you're not making art, you're not doing it right. And I just don't think that's true. I think that, inspiration is meant to find you working, that you will actually get the greatest benefit from your work when you learn how to show up and do it when you don't feel inspired, how to do things in your practice just for the sake of learning skills and learning your craft, and the value of just consistently showing up and applying yourself and following through on that commitment, because you're building trust with yourself and with your creativity. And then from that relationship comes a lot of freedom to explore and play. And it's a little bit of a paradox of like, you have to let go of that and give yourself the structure, but then once you learn how to thrive within that structure, it brings more freedom.
Yes, definitely. It doesn't sound like, oh yes, you should paint from 9 to 5 because then you'll be a really good artist. It's like, what? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And it doesn't, like, obviously the amount of structure that you put on yourself is like different for everyone. And, but I think the important piece is the consistency.
Definitely.
And over a long period of time.
Yes. And the time varies for everyone, doesn't it? So what would you say to someone who wants to be an artist, but they're too scared of like showing their work?
That's a great question. So I feel like showing the work it goes hand in hand with creating it. It's a skill that you need to build up. It's almost like you have to go through exposure therapy. I think most artists like me, like, we're so vulnerable and sensitive, and it's really hard to put yourself out there, and it's a skill that you have to build and something you have to get comfortable with over time. So if you're afraid of sharing your work, I think the best thing you can do is to practice sharing your work. And there are so many different ways to do that, though. You can block everyone you know on social media and post anonymously, and that anonymity can go a long way into making you feel like you can actually share. I think that's actually a pretty common and very helpful trick for people when they are starting out sharing their work and they're scared about what people might think. Just removing that, like, that idea of, oh, my friends from high school or my family who's, not supportive of this is going to say something and whatever. Like, just remove that. Just create a different account. Share it, block those people who you're afraid of what they think. Like, whatever it takes, give yourself that, set yourself up so that you can share in a way that's not as scary. How do you make it less scary? And I think, too, asking yourself, like, what are you actually afraid of? Like, what is the worst case scenario? And I like the idea that we could, tuck ourselves away from the world and practice and build skill and build our unique voice and come back and be this fully formed artist with a style and an aesthetic and then present that. I just don't think that that's how it works. I think actually there's a ton of benefit in sharing your work from early on, because even now, I've been painting for over a decade and I love the work I create now. I'm very confident in it. I'm confident in my skill as a painter and in the style of what I do and the process I've developed. And it's still really scary to put it out there and have someone potentially tear it apart. And people are silly and mean on the internet, and it does happen. So you will encounter that. And I think there is a lot of benefit in training yourself to just put the work out there and release the outcome. That's a skill you can develop. It's not about getting thick skin necessarily, because you still always feel it, but I think it is about just learning to get comfortable with what actually is the thing that matters about the work, which is what it means to you and what you need to say through it. And then if that message can connect with other people, it's really amazing to be able to witness that and have that happen. But you also can't control it. So it's kind of just this process of getting really comfortable with doing the work, creating it, putting it out there, letting it go, rinse and repeat as many times as you can. And
Yeah.
it is rewarding, but also you don't have to share the work right away. I think there's this pressure to become a business owner and a, social media popular artist right away, of like, well, this isn't worth doing unless you are, commercially successful in it. And I think that everyone benefits when we remove that pressure a little bit, because there's so much work that needs to happen before you get to the point where that would be sustainable. And there can be benefit in sharing that process. It's not like you need to do it privately, but I do think taking some of the pressure off yourself is one of the best ways to support that process and help it succeed. And so,
Yes.
like, I didn't start selling my work really until pretty far into my journey, and it happened quite organically. Like, people started asking. I didn't put it out there necessarily. And that was a slow evolution into doing this full time. And I was still freelancing and taking side projects and doing other consulting jobs on this, in addition to painting. And it happened over the course of years of that shift.
Mm-hmm. So when did you start making?
Don't put a timeline on yourself is what I would say.
Yeah,
Sorry.
definitely. No, it's okay. I was just basically going to ask about your income. Like, when did you start making regular sales from your art itself?
Great question. I think so. I started selling my work while I was still in grad school. I had sold a few pieces before then. I had done an art show while I was working full-time in design, and some of those pieces sold, but I wasn't anywhere near making like a living off of it. It was very sporadic. And in grad school, I was still working as a freelance designer with some clients as I went through grad school, and I started just selling my little studies that I had been doing, mostly my portrait studies and some florals, and put them up on my website and was selling them through my Instagram community. And that, I think, was over the course of like 2 years, that slowly grew and became something that by 2022, I was able to cover I had rented a studio, and I was able to cover that rent and my expenses fully with my art income regularly. And I was teaching privately here and there. I was creating small pieces and selling them for a few $100s. I was doing some commissions here and there as well, and then started doing workshops a little bit. But yeah, it was, I think, like 2022 was when it started to become a sustainable primary income stream.
Mm-hmm. Oh, very
And now
cool.
it's much more, I'm creating bigger work that sells for much more. I'm doing art fairs and shows. I work with some galleries where they sell some pieces through there. And then I teach in-person workshops and have an online class that I'm doing. So I still have, my eggs in multiple baskets, as they say, which is kind of just part of being a creative in the modern world. I think most of us are in some sort of situation like that, and I think there's wisdom in that advice. But it's all based around the signature work that I do now. And I also kind of slowly transitioned into that being primary. And that was a risk. People liked what I was doing before. And I got a lot of feedback initially, like, do you ever paint the faces without the flowers? Why do you do that? Like,
Oh,
and
no.
I decided to, I loved it and I wanted to do it. And it was connecting with enough people that I was like, nope, this is viable. I just have to stick with it.
Oh, that's so amazing, because I feel like some people would be influenced by those outside voices and then start to doubt themselves. But I guess you've put so many years of practice and dedication into your work that you stuck true to that voice of yours, basically, which is so nice. It's really good to, I guess, see that in person, see that in practice of someone actually doing that.
It was not easy, but it was also an instance of considering the source too, because I could just tell, like, the people who were giving me that feedback were not my people. My people were the ones who were connecting with it. And that too is, you know, points for sharing your work, because that feedback, when I say feedback, I don't mean like people's opinions and advice necessarily. What I mean is the ripple effects of your work, the response that you get, that message from someone that gets the heart of it and reaches out to you and says, oh, I felt this, I connected it to this experience in my life, and thank you so much. It's so beautiful and meaningful in this way. Like, when someone really gets it and it connects, that can be a very helpful compass, not in the sense of listening to other people's opinions, but in the sense of, oh, my perspective and my voice matters, and it resonates with other people who feel those same things as deeply as I do. And there's something incredibly inspiring and motivating about that can fuel your work for your whole life. You know, that's a very sustainable motivator and a really beautiful aspect of art. And I think you don't get that unless you share the work.
Yes, definitely. No, I really feel it, because I definitely feel that way when I see your work as well. It definitely resonates with me. That's why I contacted you.
I'm so glad you did.
Yeah. So you also teach. Do you want to tell us about your exciting and upcoming course?
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about that too. I think it very organically lines up with my story and everything we've been sharing, because I chose to do my first online course as an intro to oil painting. So I'm not teaching how to create my double exposure pieces, because the truth is there is no secret to them. I create those references virtually, and I had the idea for it and learned how to execute that idea with my technical skills. But beyond that, when it comes to actually painting them, I'm just painting them with the skills that I would use to paint anything else. I'm painting what I see in the reference. And so often people ask how to do what I do, but the answer is, well, you learn to be a good painter. You learn to paint well. And the way it would be really silly and disingenuous of me to teach people what I do now when that's not how I got here. Mm-hmm. I didn't get to the point where I could create these works by just learning how to do some particular technique. I got to this point by doing that work of an archaeologist, of doing a survey of lots of different things. In art school, they make you paint everything. So I wanted to create a course that would actually help people learn how to paint like themselves and equip them to go on a journey that's their own, that's authentic to them and who they need to be as an artist. And they can have the basic foundational skills to then develop their own voice and say what it is that they need to say. But they'll be able to say it because they have these techniques and these skills that can transfer and apply to anything else they want to paint. So I basically go through a lot of the mindsets for a sustainable creative practice, a lot of what we've talked about today, particularly busting that myth of the idea of talent, as well as just breaking down the intimidation factor, because a lot of people get scared to work with oils, but the reality is with modern materials available to us, they're super safe and actually quite accessible, and they can be more affordable if you know what to look for. So oils don't have to be scary, so I wanted to break down that intimidation and make them really accessible to people, and then do this kind of survey. I teach through real-time demos of a still life, a landscape, and a floral study. And I just talk through it as I'm painting, kind of Bob Ross style, where I share how I'm applying the techniques we've covered and why I'm making the decisions I'm making. And it's funny because I don't paint a lot of landscapes or still life unless I'm teaching. But these are things that teach us very particular skills that actually transfer to lots of different things. So the way that I learned to create atmospheric perspective and a sense of depth in landscape painting has shaped the way that I create a sense of transparency in my floral overlays and create a sense of depth in those. And so even though I'm not a landscape painter, I look back and go, that has shaped me. And I think that's something that in this era of social media especially, and all these specialized courses and niche things that you can learn, I love that we have access to that, and I think it's amazing. But I don't want people to forget that it's so important to kind of do that groundwork of the foundations and really sometimes force yourself to try lots of different things. One, so that you can build those transferable skills and a range of them, but also you might fall in love with something. You don't know until you try it. So I think doing that survey has a lot of value in that too, and that people can, try different things and then pull at what threads are calling to them, whatever sparks their curiosity.
Oh, it sounds amazing. It sounds like such a good in-depth course for beginners and even people who just want to try oils just generally. I'm very interested.
Oh, I hope you take it. I think, there's so many artists who are practicing in other mediums who are just I think might love oils but are scared to use them or haven't known where to start. So what I did was just design something that I wish I'd had 10 years ago when I was starting. I kind of just sat back and was like, what are all the things that I do now that I wish I knew a decade ago and had, some guidance in that. It would have saved me years of learning things the hard way, And you still have to put in the work. That's always true, no matter what you're doing. With any new skill you're learning, it takes discipline and effort. It's still going to be hard, but you don't have to go through it alone. That's kind of the benefit, is you can have a guide guiding you through those foundations. So it releases, it'll be out by the time we release this podcast.
Yes.
So people can hop on and jump in the course. It is now open, which is crazy because I've been spending months and months filming and editing and putting this together, planning and painting, all the things. So it's, I feel like I just had a baby. Here it is to the world.
I know exactly what you mean because I also just released my own course about doing a business, the business of pet portraits, because I'm a pet portrait artist. So I've just finished. It was a year in the making. So I know exactly what you mean.
It's the release happens quickly and the rush of marketing it and all of that, but the that's the tip of the iceberg. There's so much work that has gone into this. It's actually, I wrote the first outline for my Intro to Oils course in 2023. So it's, it's been maybe 2022 actually. It's been at least 3 years.
It takes a surprisingly long time to make a course.
And I think too, like any creative endeavor, this was same sort of thing as painting. Like this is what needed to come out of me. This is what I needed to say. This is the course that I needed to make, just like yours, I'm sure, is the one that needed to come out of you. It's so shaped by your experience and who you are as an artist and a person. And yeah, I think it's a really amazing time to be an artist and to learn as an artist, because we have so much available to us at our fingertips, more than any other point in human history, and that's pretty cool.
Yes, definitely. So speaking of like your art business, what part of your art business do you really enjoy right now?
Oh, well, I'm not gonna lie, it's tough timing to ask that question because I haven't been able to paint much in the last month or so, because I've just been grinding it out to, do the final touches on the course, which has been a labor of love and a creative endeavor, and there are lots of parts of it that I enjoy. I think the part of it I enjoy the most, like creating the videos and the lessons and the demos, like all of that is fun and fine. But I think it's when I see, like I teach in-person workshops as well. We do like single day intro to oil painting classes at a wonderful art and craft collective here in Los Angeles. And seeing people come with like no experience, but just they want to create, and then go through the process and feeling that sense of accomplishment and like something shifted for them, and now they realize they're capable of making a painting, and they didn't know if they were before, and now they know that they can, and they're going to go do more of them. And I think because the short answer to your question is painting. Painting is my favorite part of what I do. I wish I could spend the majority of my time painting, but I think most professional artists know, like, you're doing great if you get like 50-50. That's like actually pretty impressive if you can be painting half the time. So on really good weeks and really good seasons, I'm painting half the time and running my business the other half. Most of the time it's more time doing admin and running business and marketing and like 30% painting. But painting is my favorite part. And without being too, exaggerative, I think painting has actually saved my life. Like the creative process, the relationship with painting, with creativity, has been the thing that I've returned to again and again, no matter what I go through, no matter how hard the seasons are, through grief and suffering and joy and change and everything that life brings. My relationship with my work has been this constant, and it's truly, I think, kept me alive. It's brought so much healing and growth and beauty into my life, and it's been this kind of meditative practice, and that's carried me and helped me process the hardest things. And there's something incredibly special about knowing that teaching these practical skills can help facilitate someone else experiencing that. Like, I'm giving people tools to build their own relationship with creativity and with their work, and like that can change somebody's life, because it's changed mine. And I see it all the time. I think most people who are drawn to art are at some level feel that, you know that it's something that holds you and shapes you and challenges you and can heal you. And that's what I love about painting, and that's what I love about teaching, because I know that other people will get to experience it too.
Yeah, definitely. That's so wonderful. I love drawing as well. I feel that way. I need it. It's my therapy. I can't go a day without it because I get grumpy.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that's why the business running, admin, course launch side of it is like brutal because I haven't been able to paint as much, but it ebbs and flows. There's always going to be seasons that have more of that and seasons where I get to paint more. So
Yeah,
it's just
definitely.
part of the job.
Yeah. So for someone who wants to be an artist and find their voice, what is the one tip that you would give them?
Just keep painting.
Yeah.
I have stickers that I made that say just keep painting.
Oh,
And
that's
I
lovely.
have one on my easel, and that's the mantra that I come back to, because that will answer 99% of the problems that are keeping you stuck. You'll find the answer if you just keep painting or drawing or sculpting or whatever it is that is your, medium of choice. The answers are going to be in the work. You just keep creating. You just keep making. And, that will guide you through most of your problems. It really will. And so much easier said than done, obviously. But
Yes.
if you keep that as your compass, to just keep coming back, just keep showing up in the studio and keep creating, it won't lead you astray.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Jess, for joining me today. I have learnt so much from you. It's been wonderful. I love talking about your art. I've learnt loads. I'm sure our listeners have learnt a lot as well about finding your voice and practicing as an artist. So thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for having me. It was lovely chatting with you about these things.